What's up, everyone? Payload CMS makes it easy to add your own branding to your CMS. This is a process known as white labeling. In this video, I'll show you where you can white label and share best practices. In a few minutes, you'll have a CMS that fits your brand or your client's brand. If you want the code I use in this video, there's a link to the repo in the description. Now, let's dive in. I want to allow editors to be able to update their logos and icons without reaching out to their dev teams. To do this, we need to include these icons and logos as media and store them somewhere within our admin UI. A great place to do this is in a global that we will call settings. Let's create a new file that will be in a globals directory, and we'll call the file config.ts. So when I hit enter, that directory is created for me, and I see config.ts right there. And then we're going to import the global config from payload, and then we'll export a constant that we'll call settings, and we'll assign it the type global config, and we'll have a slug for settings, and then our fields will be an array. And I'll create one field for now. One is going to be name, light mode icon. Then we'll have type, which will be an upload field, and it'll be a relation to media. Now I can just take this, add a comma to the end, copy it, paste it 3 more times, and then we'll change this to be light mode logo, dark mode icon, then dark mode logo. Once we create this global, we can go back to our payload config, and underneath our collections, we'll add a globals option, and we'll add our settings there, and we need to import that from our config. Then we can run payload generate types to generate the types for that global. Now we can spin up our development server by running pnpm dev, and I already uploaded a couple of images that we'll use for this example, but we'll see those in action here in just a moment. So first I'll log in to my Payload CMS with my test account, and then in settings, we can see that these icons and logos have already been added. The first place you can add your branding is the login page. So if I go back, we can see that this is the login page. This is the page your editors will see when they go to your /admin route. By default, as you can see, the Payload CMS logo shows up above the form, but we can change it. First, let's create a new file in a folder that will be called graphics, and then that will be included in a directory called logo, and we'll just name it index.tsx. We're going to import React from React, and then we can export our constant called logo, and this will be an async function. And we need to initialize payload by setting await get payload, which will import automatically from payload, and set that equal to our config, which we'll need to import up here. So we'll import our config from payload config. Now we can get our constant of settings by awaiting our payload instance. We'll find global, and then we'll find the global by its slug of settings. And then we'll pull out our light mode logo and set it equal to our settings, light mode logo, and we'll cast it as our media type, which I'll import from payload types. Now we can return an image, which I'll include in a React fragment. So we'll have our image component imported from next image, and then we'll need our source, which will be our light mode logo.url, our alt, which will be light mode logo.alt. And here we see a type error, so we need to include a fallback value. Now I can space these out a little bit, and we need to include our width, which we'll have as light mode logo.width or 640, and height, which will be the light mode logo height or 360. Next, we need to pass this over to our payload config, and payload uses an import map to do this. So in our admin option, we need to add our components, and then we can add our graphics, and then finally logo. Now, instead of importing the constant into our project, we need to provide a string path to tell Payload CMS how to generate the import map. So for us, the logo path is graphics, logo, index.tsx, and # logos. So anything that comes after this # is the name of the constant, which we called logos. So I can save this and run our generate import map, and then run p-npm dev. And once we refresh, we can see our logo shows up here just fine. Now I'm going to log back in. And if we go back to our settings, we can see that I uploaded both a dark mode and a light mode version of this logo. So if I sign back out, we can come over and change out this logo with the white background with a dark mode version. So we're going to set another constant called dark mode logo, which is going to get our dark mode logo from our settings. And I'm going to copy this image and change light mode logo to dark mode logo. And we're going to add a class name because otherwise we'll see that both logos show up if we don't handle them conditionally. So we'll use CSS to handle this for us. So this will be our light mode image. And then down here, we'll have a class name for dark mode image. And we can go up to our app payload custom.css. And then for our light mode image, we can check that the HTML has the data attribute theme of dark. And if it does, we can display none our light mode image. Now we can do the opposite. If this is light, we can get our dark mode image and display none. So now when I save this, we'll see that only our dark mode logo remains. The next segment of this video will go over how to change the step icon in your admin UI. By the end of this section, you'll have rendered the icon you uploaded earlier in your dashboard. And this is just like how I replaced the logo. So I'm going to copy our logo directory and paste it into our graphics directory as icon. And then in the index.tsx, I'm going to change this to icons. And then we need to change anywhere we have logo. So I'll just select this and find and replace logo with icon and just replace all. And now when I save this and refresh over here, we'll notice that nothing changes. And that's because we need to add the import map. So I go back to our payload config. I'm going to copy our logo and change this to icon, as well as our logo directory to icon, and finally logos to icons. Then I will run payload generate import map and then p-npm dev. And now we can refresh. And now we can see this tiny little icon. So obviously this is the wrong size for this, but I can zoom in a bunch and we can start to see the icon actually show up there. And now we already handled the switch between light mode and dark mode because I'm using the same class names that I used on the logos, and we don't need to redo that. One quick thing before we move on to the rest of the video. If you're finding this video helpful, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. You can also become a member of my channel. Members receive exclusive perks like early access to videos. Thank you for your support. Right now, we can't use the REST or local APIs to get our favicons in our payload config file. This means that we also can't fetch our metadata or our Open Graph image or other data here. This is a limitation of Payload CMS. But if you are pulling this branded information from an external API, for example, you still can use the REST API in your payload config. So you have two options. The first is using the URL from the images that we just uploaded a few moments ago. Your second option is including a local version of your favicon in your repo. I recommend the first option if it's available to you. Either way, you're going to need to hard code this information. So let's get started with that. I'll go back over to our payload config, and then underneath our directory name, we're going to add a constant called icon URL, and then we're going to just use our local host 3000 API media file, and then I have the file name right here. So I'm going to copy this and paste it right here. And then we need a constant called dark icon URL. And we have API media file, and it won't be dark, it'll just be square.png. So we'll include this underneath our components within our admin options. So we can add meta, and then we're going to add our icons, which will be an array. And we can add things like fetch priority, which we'll set to high. Our sizes, which we'll just set to be 32 by 32. The image type, which is going to be an image, and these are PNGs. And then a relation of icon. Finally, we see that we have a type error, so we need to add the URL, which I'll just add the icon URL to. Now below this, we're going to copy all of this information, paste it, and then add our dark mode icon URL. And we're going to add the media option where we can add prefers color scheme dark. So now I can save this. Now Safari won't pick it up right away, but I should be able to get it from a Chrome window, which I'll move over to the left half, and we can look up our localhost admin, and we can see up at the top that our favicon is showing up there. Now I can, of course, log in, and still the favicon shows up at the top. So I'll close out this window and leave Safari up. Now the last area to consider with white labeling your project is the metadata. At the end of this segment, you'll have replaced the default values provided by Payload CMS. We'll place our metadata below our icons array, and the first option we'll look at is the title suffix. So we'll just include this as white label. So when I save this and open up a new tab, we can see that this says dashboard white label. And so if I add a hyphen, for example, this will update automatically to include the hyphen between the suffix and the title. You can change the title if you would like to. So if I change this to title, I can just do example. And so if I do this, we see that example takes the place of dashboard, but if I go into users, for example, the collection name still shows up. And so you can adjust that if you would like to in the actual collection itself, but we do still see that the title suffix remains. So we'll go back to our dashboard and remove our title. So we can see dashboard come back up. You can also add a description, which we won't be able to see, but I can just set our description to be something like a white label template for Payload CMS. And so we can save this, and when we inspect the element, we can see in our head tag that the description is here, and it says a white label template for Payload CMS. If you want to add other metadata, you can. Payload allows you to set whatever metadata you want to set as long as it exists within Next.js. All you need to do is add the metadata key from Next.js and assign it whatever value you would like to give it. So for us, we can do something like application name, and I can set this to be white label example. And now if I save this, we can see that our application name will show up here as application name, white label example. In the same way, you can add whatever open graph information you'd like to. So I'm going to open up an open graph object, and we can start with our description, which is going to say the same thing, a white label template for Payload CMS. And I can refresh, and we can see that our open graph description is set up, a white label template for Payload CMS. We can see that the title exists as well. So if we want to add a title, we can. So I'll add the title of white label example, and that'll change from our content of dashboard to white label example. I'll comment that out. That was just an example. We can also include something like site name, which will be white label example, and we should see Open Graph site name show up with white label example. And the last option I'll add is our Open Graph image. So I'll add a new constant called Open Graph image URL. And this will be a different file here, but it'll be nlv_codes.png. Then underneath our site name, we can add our images array, which will have an object with URL, and we can assign it our Open Graph image URL. And if I save that, we can see that our OG image here will be changed to our NLV codes.png. One other thing that you'll notice here is that the Twitter Open Graph information changes as well. So we can see that our description is a white label template for Payload CMS, which is what we set, as well as the content of our Twitter image is the image that we set. Again, if we want to change the title, we can. So if I uncomment out white label example and refresh, we can see that our Twitter title is white label example as well. You've now white labeled your Payload CMS admin UI. There are limitations that prevent you from fetching your metadata and your favicons, but you now have a dashboard that looks like it belongs to you. If you found this video helpful, please like it and share it with others who might also find it useful. Check to make sure you're subscribed to my channel and receiving notifications so you never miss when I release more content about Payload CMS and more. Consider becoming a member of my channel for exclusive perks. Members of my channel get early access to some videos as well as an invitation to my private Discord server. There's a link to become a member in the description. If you have questions or suggestions, please leave those in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until then, I'll see you on the next one.